Okay, so we have yesterday you guys had a lot of time to plan, right? We talked about taking charge of the writing process, and what we talked about was planning, right? Thinking about the end, thinking about the deep meaning in our story from the beginning, right? And by doing that, we take charge in the writing process. We did that yesterday. I was real happy with the amount of planning you guys did. Today, you got more time to write. Our goal today is to focus on slowing down and stretching out the tense moments in our story. Right? So really slowing down the heart of the story and using that to build tension. Okay? I like to think of it as slow motion. And we see this in Hollywood all the time. So I'm going to share with you one scene from one of the greatest movies of all time, Rocky II. And this is the end of the movie. This is the final fight. As you watch, I want you to think about how the slow motion impacts the story, impacts the fight, impacts what you see. And we're going to ask, why would the writers, the producers, the directors, why did they use slow motion here? Okay, that's going to be my question to you. Why did they use slow motion? Are you ready to see one of the greatest fights of all time?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
I started at the beginning.
No. This is the end. See? I got goosebumps. Daksa. Right? Now, my question is, well, first of all, wasn't that awesome? Don't you want to go rent it? You know, go to home and Google Play movies? Watch Rocky 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all of them. My question is, why would the director, the writer, I don't know who exactly, why did they choose to put in slow motion right there? Because that 10 seconds that the referee counted, okay, that 10 seconds, it actually lasted 1 whole minute. Right? So they took 10 seconds and stretched it to 1 minute. So my question to you is, why? The turn and talk. Why did they do that? So what did we say? Who's got an answer? Why might they do that? Ryan, ask someone else. You pick. Quickly.
Lucas? To give an impact in nervous or exciting scene.
Yeah, that's like to create an impact, right? This is an exciting moment. This is where the tension is at its peak, right? It's the climax of the story. right? Everything builds to this point, to those last 10 seconds, right? So they've slowed it down, right? They've taken that 10-second piece, stretched it into 60. Any other answers? Eben, what do you think? Or you still, right now you're thinking, I can't wait to get home and rent Rocky 1 and 2. So you're not thinking about slow motion? What do you think? Why did they slow it down? What did the people around you say?
To make the watcher to watch the movie until the
Right. It draws us in, right? It draws us in. So, what we're going to do, we're going to take this idea about stretching out tense moments and bring it into our stories. So let's think about a story we all know real well. Everything will be okay. Right? You remember Everything Will Be Okay? The story about Jim and his brother Paul and the cat Smokey that he suffocates in the pretzel can? Right? Now, in that story, what do you think the tensest moment is in that story? Where does it all come to a climax? Where does it, Tom?
Like when the cat is in the crystal jar.
Yeah, exactly. When they arrive at Dr. Milk's to put the cat out of its misery. So let's have a look and see what's happening there. Where's lesson 14? So this is that part, right? I'll be here in a second. Time for a new computer, huh? So here we are. Now, in that scene, right? What I noticed when it went into slow motion is that we are able to see things and hear things that we would miss if it happened at regular speed, right? So I felt every step that Rocky took. And when he grabbed this rope, right? He grabbed this rope, and then he grabbed these two, and then he slipped down some, and then he grabbed both, and then his wife cries, and his coach yells, and then the other side, Apollo Creed, his corner, they scream at him, and he's hanging from the ropes. Right? All this stuff we can see because we slow it down. We see every tiny action, all these pressure-filled little moments. So we take that idea and say, okay, maybe we can use this when we write. Okay, with the pressure-filled moments in my story. So let's look at our mentor text. Okay, Dr. Milk is not there when my brother pulls the car into the parking lot. It's after hours. My brother has a key, and I'm impressed. Come on, Paul says in his tape-charged voice. Get the box now. Bring it in on here. All right, so we got tiny actions, right? We're not saying, Paul told me to come in. Right? We have dialogue. We feel like we're there, right? He flicks on the light in the waiting room. You're coming in the back with me, he commands. I'll need your help, Dave. So we have another step, right? So first they pull up there. Then Paul says, come on, they get out of the car. Then they go into place. Paul turns on the lights. He calls for Jim to come to the back. Then they talk to each other. What are you going to do, I ask. I'm holding the box tight against my chest. I feel Smokey moving around inside. What do you think? You heard your mother. The cat's sick. It's bad sick. She's your mother too. We got this going on here. She happens to be right, Paul tells me. With an animal that far gone, you don't have a choice. It's got to be put to sleep. I think the tears I jam back into my body are going to kill me. So we got some inner thinking. We got dialogue. We got tiny actions, bit by bit. right? All coming out, just like that scene from Rocky, where we could see and feel every little moment, right? That's what we need to do when we write our stories, right? When we get to the real heart of the story, the tense moment, that's what we got to do, right? So can you see how the author's doing it here? Do you see how he's stretching out this moment? He didn't just say, Paul brought me into Dr. Milk's and he suffocated the cat in a pretzel can. Right? He doesn't just tell us what happened. He showed us. He stretches out this moment. Okay? And he does that by showing these bit-by-bit actions, including inner thinking, dialogue. Okay? We already know the characters, and it's very realistic. We're stretching it out because this is the climax. It's the moment in the story where the tension is at its highest. Okay? And we're slowing it down. Now, we know what happens here. Right? It goes on bit by bit. Everything they say to each other, every action they take is here in this part of the story. Okay? Eventually, the scratching, it stops. Okay? Very descriptive. It made some students in the morning class cry, right, when I read it the first time. Okay? Because the author really slowed it down and really caused a reaction in the reader. Okay? Now, you guys remember my story, right? The one about the car? The RC car? Right? The radio-controlled car? Let me show you what I mean. Let's go back here. That's the car. Right up there. Doesn't it look cool? Not really a toy. Right? There are adults that love these things and their whole life is these cars. Right? Very cool. These are becoming more popular in Korea now. Last time I was in Seoul, I saw a shop with these in a department store. The first time I'd ever seen one in Seoul. Right, so that's, you know my story, right? Now in my story, I told you there were these different, kind of different scenes in the story. Like the first conversation with my dad when he says, you know, don't open until Saturday. And then me touching the box and opening the box, opening the bags inside the box. Pieces falling on the floor. My dad on Thursday when he looked at the box. These are all different parts of my story, right? Which one do you think holds the most tension? Which part should I really stretch out? What do you think? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Which one? Just tell the person next to you. Which one does it seem like would have the most tension? Which one do you really want to stretch out? Okay. Durang, can you share what you said to Tom?
So we choose like number G, and so we decide to like stretch on that because like you can write about how like you feel and how slow the time goes past, and you can like explain what his stats like eyesight or like what he talks about.
That's right. You want to add something, Daniel? Did most of you say G? No? Yes? I would choose G, right? That would get stretched out the most. Now, I wouldn't ignore the other parts of the story, right? I wouldn't ignore the conversation, the first conversation where my dad said, don't open it. I wouldn't ignore that, right? I would include that dialogue. But this one right here, G at the end, this is where I learned my lesson. This is where I learned that my dad really understands me, right? And this is where I felt the most pressure as, as the main character. Because this is where I find out, like, is my dad going to be really upset? And is he going to take away my car and give it to my cousin? What's going to happen? Am I going to get smacked? Right? Am I going to get grounded, put in my room for a week? What's going to happen? Right? This was a tense moment. Right? This scene contains the most tension in the whole story. It's the climax. And G is what I would choose to really stretch out the most. And I'd have, a description of the expression on my dad's face, the dialogue, including everything we say. I would talk about how I feel, right? The mood in the room. Okay? All these things I would do in this scene, right? Because this is the most important part of the story. This is where I learned my lesson. So as you go back today and write, okay, I want you to think about your scenes, the pieces of your story. Which one holds the most tension? And how can you really stretch it out? Right? Think of it like one of those, what do you call them? Airheads. You guys buy Airheads down at the store over there?
Earbuds.
Airheads. The candy. It's a chewy candy. You never had an
I
Airhead?
didn't mean Airheads.
Airheads.
Stretching.
It's a candy. It's sugar. It's terrible for you. But it's an American candy. They sell it in that store in Eno Edu over there. You know that store?
Oh,
Star,
yeah.
star.
Anyway, it's this candy, and if you grab it and pull it, it just stretches out. Like it'll stretch from here to the door. Yeah. It's candy, right? Anyway, this tense moment in your story, okay, when you get to that scene, I really want you to focus on stretching it out. Think